Hi, boys and girls. It's time for another Bible story. Today is an exciting story. It's about Daniel. Do you remember our song about Daniel, how Daniel prayed to God each day and always did his best? Well, this is the story of Daniel. Have you ever seen a lion in the zoo? I have. I saw some at Blank Park Zoo. Lions are big and strong and sometimes kind of scary, aren't they? Now, aren't you glad that they are in a cage? What if they weren't in a cage? They might be running loose, and if they were hungry, it could be really dangerous. I don't know about you, but I'd be running as fast as I could and probably climbing the highest tree. Well, today we're going to learn about some lions and about Daniel. Daniel knew that God is stronger and greater than anyone or anything in the whole world. Daniel's love for God and his obedience to God helped him when he was put in a place of danger. So we'll have the first part today and the second part tomorrow. So when Daniel was a boy, just like Naaman's servant girl, he and some friends were taken far away to a land where they were to work for the king. Right away, the boys were given some special food made there in the palace. Now this was a little problem for Daniel because he was from Israel and he and his friends, they ate the food that God wanted him to eat. And I'm going to tell you, if it's from God, it would have been really healthy because God knows what our bodies need and they would have been strong. But now at the palace, the king's food probably wasn't that healthy. And the boys knew that. And so they had to decide, are we going to obey what God says or what the king says? And it could be really dangerous. So they made a deal. And so Daniel asked the king's servant to allow Daniel and his 3 friends to obey God and eat only the kind of food their people were supposed to eat. Well, the servant agreed to that Daniel could eat just the food that God wanted him to eat. And do you know what happened after 10 days? Daniel and his friends were stronger than any of the other boys in that palace. They were so strong because they did what was right and ate the good food and not the king's food. And so Daniel learned over and over that it is always best to obey God. When he grew up, Daniel became a very important man, and he actually ended up working for King Darius. Can you imagine that? Going from being taken from your land to now you work for the king in the land that you live? It's kind of like Joseph and how he worked for Pharaoh. Well, only King Darius was more important than Daniel. It's kind of like he was the second king because he was so important because he made good decisions. That's great. But some of the other leaders under King Darius, they were jealous of Daniel. It's not fair. Why does the king like Daniel so much? And they wanted to be more important than Daniel, and they began to hate Daniel. They watched what Daniel did, and they tried to get him into trouble, but they couldn't find anything that he did wrong. He was always doing what's right. It's because he obeyed God, and doing right is the right thing, okay? And so, no matter how closely they watched Daniel, they could not catch him doing anything wrong because he didn't. He loved and obeyed God, and he was a good, kind man. The men decided they would have to find another way to get rid of Daniel. They knew one thing that made Daniel different from most other people in the kingdom. Daniel worshipped the one true God, and others didn't. And they knew that's what made Daniel different. So even though Daniel was doing the right thing, they were going to try to twist it to make it look like Daniel was doing wrong. So let's listen to their evil plan. Okay? The leaders who were jealous of Daniel, they knew that 3 times every day Daniel went home and went upstairs to worship and pray to God. There he would open a window that faced the city of Jerusalem, like God's city, and he would pray to God 3 times a day. I kind of like to think maybe he did it in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. That's just a good reminder that we can pray anytime. Okay? And he would get on his knees and he would pray to God and praise him. The leaders thought that maybe they could use this against him. And so they went to the king with this evil plan that they had. Because remember our song says, some wicked men who hated God put Daniel to the test. That's this part of the story. And they said to the king, "O king, we hope you live forever. All of the important people who work for you have gotten together and agreed to a wonderful plan. We want you to make a new law that for the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any man or to any god except you, O king, will be thrown into a den of hungry lions." This is what they were saying. If somebody prayed to somebody else besides King Darius, which we should not pray to people, if they prayed to somebody else besides King Darius, they'd be thrown into a den of very hungry lions. Well, when the king heard this, King Darius, he was very proud. And he thought this meant that the people thought he was more important and more wonderful than anything or anyone else. That's pride, when we think we are better than other people. And he's going to find out that his pride got him into trouble, or got his friend into trouble. Right away, King Darius had the law written down just as the men had asked. The wicked men knew that in this country, once a law was written down, no one could change the law. All right, so if anybody was caught praying to somebody else besides King Darius, what would happen? Den of hungry lions. You got it. Okay, so the law was written down, and it was sealed with the king's special ring, and he would seal it with called wax, and nobody could change it, not even King Darius himself. His own law, he couldn't change his mind. He had to stick with it. And so it wasn't long before Daniel heard about the new law. He knew that his enemies were trying to get him into trouble. He knew that if he went up to his window the way he had always done before, those jealous leaders would be watching for him to pray. Daniel knew that if he prayed, he would be thrown into the lion's den. So what do you think he did? I wonder. I don't think I would want to be thrown into a den of hungry lions. I know I wouldn't, because I would get eaten. That's just what would happen. Well, let's see. Daniel could say, "Hey, I'll just do it quietly. I won't move my lips. I won't go to the window. I'll just pray to God like this. Then nobody will see me. Or I could just not pray for 30 days, because that's what the law says. I'll just kind of skip it this month." What do you think? Do you think Daniel's going to obey the king or God? That's a tough one, to obey the king or God. But what the king was saying was wrong. And what's worse is this king was his friend, and he made this law. Now what would happen? Well, you'll just have to watch the next video to find out.